Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Arthur C. Clarke. I've been planning on making this video since I started the channel in spring of 2023, and now it's getting a 5e re-release in WotC's Quests from the Infinite Staircase, scheduled for July of 2024. A few warnings: this isn't going to be a short video. That would be a grave injustice to this adventure. Also, this video is primarily for dungeon masters interested in running the adventure. If you're planning to experience this adventure as a player, this video includes massive spoilers, and I recommend watching something else on my channel to avoid spoiling the fun. If you're still here, buckle up, prepare for takeoff. Having ran many groups to this mega dungeon many times since its first release in 1980, I have some important advice showing you how to maximize your results. I'll even be offering multiple methods for running it that you'll definitely want to know before taking on this unique adventure. Additionally, my advice for DMing, it's contrary to the original intent, but my guidance will level up your game master skills, making this the perfect exercise for those wishing to test and advance many of their most important DM skills. So this is your final warning. If you're not familiar with this adventure and the secrets here, go watch something else on my channel. We were fortunate back when it was first released because none of us had a clue what we were about to get ourselves into. You know, sort of like the very first time Empire Strikes Back was released in the theaters and we all got to discover the true identity of Luke's father, which now we all know is Darth Jar Jar. The original adventure is officially set in the mountains of the world of Greyhawk, hence the name Expedition to the Barrier Peaks, but there's nothing preventing you from changing a few names and putting it in any campaign setting, in any location that best suits your needs. With only a few minor changes, it could be located underground in the middle of a vast desert, or even in the bottom of a very large body of water. Heck, you could even put it on the moon of your game world. Speaking of adapting it to other campaign worlds, a few monsters that were unique to this adventure have since appeared in other official publications. Seems that some of the critters got loose and have been spreading to other worlds. Here's a froghemoth I painted just for this video. It is easily one of the craziest first edition AD&D monsters to have found its way into 5th edition. I recently even saw a Kickstarter for an adventure heavily inspired by this, calling itself Expedition from the Mysterious Peaks for 5th edition. We'll have to check that out when it's available. But for now, we have the original classic adventure. This is the same copy I've had since the 1980s. You can see all of my yellow highlighted text and DM notes in my original copy. And here's the Goodman Games 5e conversion, which will never be sullied by ink from my own hand. What many are unaware of is that the adventure had its start as a module for Metamorphosis Alpha, and was first ran as a Metamorphosis Alpha adventure at an early Origins convention before being converted to D&D. Because the adventure was originally designed for tournament play, there are time constraints included among the requirements for success. Failure to complete the adventure within the allotted time results in the site being plundered and destroyed by local armies. But even then, given the size of the dungeon, this is a difficult task, and time itself becomes a major obstacle to success. Reading directly from the adventure's preface, this module was begun early in 1976 when TSR was contemplating publication of a science fantasy role-playing game. Jim Ward had already shown us some rough notes on Metamorphosis Alpha. I thought it would be a splendid idea to include Jim's game at Origins 2 and introduce the concept to D&D players by means of the tournament scenario. I laid out the tournament from old Greyhawk Castle campaign material involving a spaceship, and Rob Kuntz helped me to populate the ruined vessel. Both this scenario and Metamorphosis Alpha proved successful, but while the latter has been continually available since mid-1976, only a few copies of the tournament dungeon used for Origins 2 have been around. Metamorphosis Alpha is currently being rewritten and expanded for a major new edition, and the Gamma World game is highly popular too. As this module offers a unique and challenging blend of fantasy and science fantasy role-playing, it seemed logical to reintroduce it to the public. What could be more logical than to make available a scenario which blends the two role-playing approaches into a single form? Now designed to be playable with advanced Dungeons & Dragons rules, the Expedition to the Barrier Peaks will serve as both an exciting insertion into your campaign and as a primer on how to combine science into your fantasy role-playing. I hope that you will enjoy reading and playing it as much as I enjoyed writing it. Gary Gygax. Dragon Magazine number 116 ranked this the 5th best adventure ever created. It quoted Mike Merrills, who co-led design for 2014's 5th edition D&D, as saying, "I had this terrible conflict within myself to immediately tell my friends about it at war, with a maniacal, desperate drive to keep it hidden at all costs. I used to think the adventure was meant to be a piece of the Warden from Metamorphosis Alpha. However, Gary clarified that while Barrier Peaks was inspired by it, they were not the same. The size and the technology in this vehicle should make such speculation quite misplaced," he stated. "The downed spaceship is far too small, and its science quite different from that of the famed Starship Warden. The connection between Barrier Peaks and Metamorphosis Alpha is thus more of a thematic one. Be sure to keep an eye out for my Metamorphosis video in the near future." Haha, no pun intended. 5e conversions. This adventure will be included as the final quest in the upcoming Quests from the Infinite Staircase anthology. I previously covered the Lost Caverns of Silkant, which will also appear in that collection of classic adventures, both originally authored by Gary Gygax. Goodman Games, with their Adventures Reincarnated series, made a 5e conversion with valuable additional material and some important corrections to the original. I bought that without hesitation. I am so glad I did. I'll bet my life savings the WotC version isn't going to come anywhere near the quality and creativeness of the Goodman Games adaptation. Now, I'm not big on prejudging things, but the team over at Goodman Games really knocked it out of the park. The original has 5 levels, while the Goodman Games 5e conversion has 7. Goodman added some fantastic wilderness encounters and an expanded alternate introduction and ending. Goodman Games also included new maps that have corrected inconsistencies or errors from the original. Keep in mind, those original maps were created prior to personal computing and self-publishing had become easily accessible, unless you count the Apple IIe, which is why some of the maps were reused for the 3rd edition Gamma World adventure, Epsilon Cyborg. I rate the Goodman Games 5e conversion a solid 10 out of 10. If I had any complaints at all, it might be that the original tournament module wasn't included, but that's just being really nitpicky and probably would have only appealed to a very small number of die-hard fans. However, RPG.net summed up their review by saying the Goodman Games version was what happens when you care about the sanctity of the source material more than you care about young gamers running it. Were they even reading the same book? The Goodman Games version is really the best and absolutely a must for anyone interested in running it in 5e D&D. And now some DM tips. The very best parts of this adventure are its massive size and all the technological wonders found within, including what were at the time many new monsters. I have talked before about designing the ecology of your dungeon, and this adventure has an enormous garden level full of trees, plants, and other horrors awaiting the foolish. First, you can find some beautiful realistic maps online made by John Pintar. I'll have a link in the description. He only remade the original 5 levels, so you'll need to use the additional maps made by Goodman Games for those extra levels. Before running this adventure, heed my warnings. Including it as part of an existing campaign will have a long-lasting impact that you may not want. This is a mega dungeon, where the end boss is a mind flayer equipped with a blaster rifle and devastating explosive grenades. I don't say this lightly. Don't make the mistake of running this without seriously contemplating the long-term effects and impact it will have on your game. And since this is a mega dungeon, you're going to need players who welcome that style of play. Furthermore, this adventure introduces your heroic fantasy adventurers to a completely different genre of exploration, which might be off-putting to some players. But I wouldn't worry about those people too much, because anyone who doesn't love this adventure is probably a huge Nickelback fan. A big part of what makes this adventure so unique is its creative cross-genre nature. But it's no longer the 1980s, Duran Duran no longer dominates the airwaves, and all of us old school gamers know exactly what to expect from it. Most of the mystery, and thus much of what made this so special, is now missing. However, a very talented DM, and I know you are a very talented DM, they could use their creativity to make this adventure special once more. As special as it was when it all took us by surprise. And here's how. As a dungeon master, you have the freedom to run this adventure in multiple styles, which isn't necessarily always possible with other published adventures. In addition to it just being a weird mega dungeon that blends sci-fi with fantasy, you can alter your DMing style in ways that were never intended. For example, this adventure blends great with the horror genre, or its distant cousin, comedy. Finally, you might choose to face the ultimate challenge of hiding entirely the nature of this adventure through simply using descriptive words and explanations that only reflect the perception of the player's character's primitive understanding and not the players themselves. To use this method, you wouldn't be showing your players any of the illustrations, only using the included art to help you describe scenes to your players. Let's discuss how to attempt these. Horror. I recently uploaded a full video on how to tackle the horror genre in tabletop role-playing. Everything in that video will apply here as you so choose. What you'll want to do is think about movies such as Saturn III, or Nicolas Cage in Willy's Wonderland. Just find any movie filled with killer insane robots and use it for inspiration. Because the ship is malfunctioning, as DM, you can control when doors suddenly close, separating party members. There will be flickering lights, blood trails, the smell of oil and other chemicals. Think about any of the many movies about a derelict spaceship filled with monsters. The ship is infested with vegapygmies, and these could be truly horrifying if you lean into their alien nature. There's entire articles online discussing their ecology, and you can expand on this yourself. For horror-themed adventure, the vegapygmies become cannibals that cover their bodies in spiritual armor. Now, in case you're unfamiliar with that term, it means they smear poo all over their bodies to ward off evil spirits. The article you absolutely must read to get the most out of these is by Keith Amand from his The Monsters Know What They're Doing series. I'll have a link in this description. Kids and comedy. My next suggestion is to try your luck at the comedy genre. This can work with players from any age group, but will find its most success with younger players. If you run this for children, I recommend turning it into a light-hearted comedic romp full of silly, exaggerated encounters. Keep it fun and loose. Lasers and monsters. The only concern here is the length, so you might need to shorten the adventure, lose a few levels before they begin to lose interest. Maybe just wrap it up by saying they succeed, etc. Whatever you need to do to keep it enjoyable. And although the comedic approach might offer the most enjoyment for young players, you could use some of these tips with adults as well. There are countless opportunities for comedic relief, from the vegapygmies to the robots. And feel free to use the illustrations as intended for young groups of players. The comedic silliness in illustrations will definitely keep a younger audience engaged. And the third method is surprise, it's a spaceship. Now, if I'm going to throw a surprise party for you, why would I want to show you pictures of all the decorations and your friends in their hiding places? Wouldn't that defeat the whole purpose of the surprise? This adventure is made special not only by the mixed genres and huge size of the mega dungeon, it also has a fantastic booklet of old school illustrations depicting objects and encounter locations found within. But the second you show your players even the very first picture, the entire surprise is ruined. As modern people living in the 21st century, one glance at any of those illustrations and it becomes pretty obvious what the entire adventure is about. And that's when metagaming begins. I really need to do a full video explaining how I deal with overt blurting out of metagaming information that ruins the fun for other players. Can you say psychic damage? Now, looking at those illustrations, it tells players exactly what's happening, but that wouldn't be the case with your heroic fantasy characters. Have you ever heard the phrase perception equals reality? The fact is, your fantasy characters would not perceive robots and androids. They wouldn't understand the interior of a spaceship. They'd think it was some paranoid wizard who covered his lair in metal armor. Maybe it's a lightning-specked sorcerer wanting to create a death trap for invaders. Characters wouldn't understand the concept of robots. Instead, they see constructs, possibly warforged, maybe modrons from the clockwork nirvana of Mechanus. And that's how you need to sell this to your players. What I'm suggesting is to not show your players the illustrations, or at least hold off as long as you can until they solve it on their own. Instead, use the illustrations as your guide to explain what the PCs see. That's if you're running the adventure for adults and you're looking to really level up your skills as a DM. Using this playstyle, think about describing medical labs as otherworldly alchemist workshops and torture chambers. Key cards are colorful magical wafers made from a shell-like material, and even if detected for, they won't radiate magic. The weapons are wands and other artificer devices. Whatever you do, just remember to only use language that the characters would understand from their perspective, not the players themselves. Your goal is to use language against your players so they never understand this is a sci-fi adventure. It should only be after a significant amount of exploration the characters begin to make the connection, if at all. But beware, if you have grumpy, unimaginative players who are allergic to fun, this method could backfire, and they might stop letting you be the DM. The idea of maintaining a distance between player knowledge and character perception is baked into the adventure in the form of flowcharts used by characters trying to determine how to use advanced technological items. These charts were heavily inspired by the charts found in the first edition of the Gamma World role-playing game. No matter what you do, when running adults through this, maximize the lethal intellect of the blaster rifle-wielding, grenade-carrying mind flayer at the end. It could perhaps use grenades as booby traps. It should have the upper hand over the PCs for a long time. It knows the area and it knows how to use the technology. It needs to terrify your characters. It needs to seem like it is constantly one step ahead of the players. As DM, feel free to assume that it knows everything you know about the PCs, and it will use that information to maximum effect. And now my conclusion. One of my first videos for this channel was a discussion about how to introduce sci-fi into your own heroic fantasy role-playing games. If you want to learn more about this topic, I hope you'll look at that video. Plus, I have a lot of useful links in this video's description. This can be a remarkably enjoyable adventure, and I hope that you'll enjoy it as much as I have many times over the years. And as always, I'm your host, Atten, here at We Love TTRPGs, and I appreciate your support by liking the video and leaving a comment. I enjoy reading your feedback, unless it's hate posting. I'm not a big fan of the hate posting and downvotes, but I've come to understand that since I'm not repeating Reddit talking points, many of my videos also serve as IQ tests, and not everyone passes. But I'd sincerely like to thank the 93% of you who do. I'm grateful that you've taken the time to watch. I'm here because of you, because of all of you, and maybe one day, YouTube will stop killing my videos after 24 hours so they can reach a broader audience. When that happens, I will be investing much of the earnings into doing good things in this world for those in need, for our community. Now, for now, thank you so much.